The nurse said my blood pressure was dropping. She said it calmly, the way medical people say things that are actually terrifying. And I remember staring at the ceiling tiles and thinking about how I needed to call my mother. I had been trying to reach her for 40 minutes. My husband, Marcus, was the one who found me. I want to make sure you understand that part before anything else. Not my parents, not my sister. Marcus. He came home from work to find me curled on the bathroom floor, pale and shaking. And he didn't ask questions. He just picked me up and drove. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, because none of this makes sense without the beginning. I'm 29 years old. I work as a financial analyst for a mid-size firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Marcus and I have been married for 3 years. We live in a 2-bedroom house, with a yard we keep meaning to do something with, and a dog named Biscuit, who thinks he owns the couch. By most measures, my life is ordinary and good. My family, though. My family is a different story. My parents live 40 minutes away, in the same house where my sister Brianna and I grew up. My sister is 24. She has never held a job for longer than 5 months. She has a boyfriend named Tyler, who my father treats like the son he never had, even though Tyler once borrowed my dad's truck and returned it with a cracked taillight and zero explanation. My parents are not wealthy people. But somehow Brianna always has her nails done, always has a new outfit, always has whatever she asked for last week. I have been supplementing my parents' household for 4 years. It started small, $60 here when my dad's car needed a part, $100 there, when my mom's prescription cost more than she expected. The amounts grew gradually the way these things do, until I was sending $400 a month and calling it just helping out. Marcus never told me to stop. He's not that kind of person. But I know he noticed, because he kept a separate spreadsheet of our household budget, and he updated it every time I transferred money, quietly, without saying a word, which was somehow worse than if he'd argued with me about it. I told myself it was the right thing to do. They're my parents. You take care of your parents. That's what you do. What you tell yourself, anyway. Here is what I knew, but did not fully acknowledge. My parents had 2 daughters, and they had always loved one of them more. Not dramatically, not cruelly, most of the time. Just in the small, consistent ways that add up over a lifetime. Brianna got the car at 16. I got a bus pass and a speech about responsibility. Brianna came home from college early one semester, and my parents rearranged their anniversary trip so she wouldn't be alone. I got the flu junior year of high school, and my mother left soup on the stove with a note that said, "Feel better," and went to Brianna's school play. These things are small. I know that. I carried them anyway. The way you carry things you've never been allowed to put down. Marcus knew all of this. We had talked about it, many times, late at night when I couldn't sleep. He would listen and hold my hand and say, quietly and without pressure, "You know you can stop, right? Whenever you're ready, you can just stop." And I would nod, and I would not stop, because stopping felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. The morning everything changed. I woke up at 6 a.m. with a pain in my side that I told myself was nothing. Marcus and I had been trying to get pregnant for 14 months. We had not told my parents. We had not told Brianna. We had told Marcus's mother, Carol, who lived in Richmond, and sent us vitamins in the mail, and checked in every week with a text that just said, "Thinking of you both," and somehow, that was enough. 2 weeks before all of this, I had seen a positive test. I had cried in the bathroom, and then walked out and showed Marcus, and he had held me for a long time without saying anything, which is exactly the right thing to do. I had not yet called my mother. I was waiting for the right moment, or maybe I was waiting to feel safe enough to share it, which is different, and I think I knew it was different. The pain got worse through the morning. By noon, I was sweating through my shirt. By 2 o'clock, I was on the bathroom floor, and Marcus was calling 911. I want to be clear about something because I have been asked about this. I was conscious. I was alert. I knew where I was, and I could speak, and I had a husband standing next to me who was, by law and by every practical measure, my next of kin and my emergency contact. I had filled out that paperwork myself. Marcus was listed first. He was the one the hospital called. He was the one who signed everything that needed signing, who sat beside me while the doctor explained what was happening, who held my hand during the ultrasound where we saw what we had already begun to understand. Ectopic pregnancy. Internal bleeding. Emergency surgery needed immediately. I said yes. Marcus said yes. The surgery happened. What my parents were doing at the time, I found out later. At 2:15 inches the afternoon, Marcus called my mother. He told her I was being rushed to the hospital. He told her it was serious. He told her the name of the hospital and the floor. My mother said, "Oh my God. Okay. Brianna is having a situation right now. Can I call you back in a few minutes?" Marcus said he stood in the hospital hallway, looking at his phone for a moment, trying to understand what he'd just heard. He called back 12 minutes later. My mother did not answer. At 3:40, my father called Marcus back. By this point, I was already in surgery. My father said, "Hey, is everything okay? Your mom said Claire was at the hospital?" Marcus explained everything. The pregnancy, the emergency, the surgery that was already happening. My father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Wow. Okay. Well, keep us posted." He did not come to the hospital that day. My mother did not come to the hospital that day. Marcus sat in a waiting room chair for 3 hours with a cup of coffee he didn't drink, and when they brought me out of surgery and I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was his face, and that is something I will remember for the rest of my life. Not the relief on his face, though that was real and I saw it clearly. What I remember is that he was simply there, without drama, without needing me to thank him. Just there, because where else would he be? "Hey," he said. "Hey," I said. "Biscuit is at the neighbor's." I texted Carol. "She's driving down tomorrow morning." I nodded. My eyes were still heavy. "Your parents know," he said. His voice was careful and even, and it told me everything I needed to know about how that conversation had gone. "They said they'll come by tomorrow." I closed my eyes again. "Okay," I said. My parents came the next afternoon, around 1 o'clock. They brought flowers from the hospital gift shop, the kind wrapped in plastic with a balloon attached, and my mother hugged me and said she'd been so worried, and my father patted my arm and looked uncomfortable, the way men of his generation look uncomfortable in medical settings. Marcus sat in the corner chair the entire time, quiet, and I watched him watching them, and I thought about how much he knew without saying any of it. "We would have come sooner," my mother said, "but Brianna was just in such a state. You know how she gets. And the situation with the dress." "What dress?" I asked. I don't know why I asked. Maybe I needed to hear it. My mother explained. Brianna was in a friend's wedding in the spring. She was a bridesmaid. The bridesmaid dress had been ordered and had arrived with a small tear along the hem and a stain near the waist. The dress had cost $240. The vendor was being difficult about refunds. Brianna had been crying since noon the previous day. My mother had spent the afternoon on the phone with the vendor, and then on the phone comforting Brianna, and then driving over to Brianna's apartment to look at the dress in person. While I was in surgery, while Marcus sat alone in a hospital waiting room, I didn't say anything about it that day. I thanked them for coming. I let my mother fluff my pillow and my father tell me I'd be back on my feet in no time. Marcus walked them to the elevator when they left, and when he came back into the room, he sat down and looked at me, and I looked at him, and neither of us said anything, because there was nothing to say that hadn't already been said by everything that had happened. Carol arrived that evening with a container of chicken soup and a second container of her lemon pound cake, and she sat with me for 2 hours, and mostly talked about small things. The garden. A book she'd been reading. A funny thing Marcus did when he was 7. And I thought about how easy it was to be with someone who was simply glad you were okay. The weeks that followed were quiet. I recovered at home. Marcus worked from the living room so he wouldn't have to leave me alone. His mother called every other day. My parents called 3 times in the first 2 weeks, and each time my mother found a way to bring Brianna into the conversation within the first few minutes. The dress had been sorted out. Brianna was fine. Brianna had started a new job. Brianna and Tyler were talking about getting a dog. I listened. I said the right things. And then, on the 1st of the month, I transferred $400 to my parents' account the way I always did. Marcus didn't say anything. He just updated the spreadsheet. I went back to work 6 weeks after surgery. Life moved forward the way it does. Marcus and I were quieter with each other for a while. Not in a bad way, but in the way of people who have been through something and are still finding their footing on the other side of it. We didn't talk about trying again right away. We just lived our life and walked Biscuit in the evenings, and slowly found our way back to normal. 3 months after the hospital, Brianna called me to announce that she was pregnant. My parents took them out to dinner to celebrate. My father cried, apparently. My mother called me the next morning to tell me the news, secondhand. And I sat with the phone pressed against my ear and looked out the kitchen window and felt something I still don't have a perfect word for. Not jealousy, exactly. Something older and heavier than that. We're just so excited, my mother said. Brianna is going to be such a wonderful mother. That's great, Mom, I said. I kept sending the $400. Here is what I want to say about that, because I know it's the part that's hard to understand. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about what stopping would mean. If I stopped, I had to admit that I had been sending money for 4 years to parents who did not show up for me when I was in surgery. I had to look directly at something I had been looking slightly away from my whole life. I wasn't ready to do that yet. Marcus understood this. He never pushed. He just kept the spreadsheet and waited for me to be ready. The baby shower was scheduled for a Saturday in March. My mother called 3 weeks ahead to make sure I was coming, which I found interesting since she called Brianna directly for most things and usually treated me as an afterthought. I said yes, I'd be there. She called again a week before to ask if I could arrive early to help set up. I said yes again. I ordered a gift from the registry. I wrote a card. The night before the shower, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the card I had written, and I thought about everything. The $400 every month. The plastic-wrapped flowers with the balloon. My mother's voice saying Brianna is just in such a state. Marcus in the waiting room with a cup of coffee he didn't drink. I thought about Carol driving 4 hours because her son's wife was in the hospital. I went into the home office, and I opened the spreadsheet Marcus kept. I looked at it for a long time. 41 transfers. 4 years and 2 months of $400 a month. $16,800. Not counting the individual amounts before the monthly arrangement. I sat with that number. Then I went to bed and I slept better than I had in months. The baby shower was at my parents' house. My mother had decorated with yellow streamers and little paper flowers, and a banner above the kitchen doorway. The living room was full of women I mostly recognized, neighbors and church friends and a few of Brianna's friends who were loud and photographed everything. Tyler stood in the backyard looking at his phone. My father hovered near the food table. I helped carry chairs in from the garage when I arrived. I set out napkins. I refilled the lemonade pitcher twice. I watched Brianna open gifts in the center of the room while everyone cooed over tiny socks and a stuffed elephant and a white blanket embroidered with yellow ducks. My mother sat beside Brianna and handed her each gift and laughed at everything Brianna said and touched her arm and her shoulder and her hair with the easy, constant affection of someone who has never once had to ration it. I sat in a folding chair at the edge of the room and watched and thought about all of it. After the gifts, my mother stood up and made a small speech. She talked about Brianna as a little girl. She talked about what a wonderful surprise this pregnancy was. She said that watching her younger daughter become a mother was one of the greatest joys of her life. There was a moment after she sat down when everyone was still clapping, and Brianna was wiping her eyes and my father was nodding from across the room, and I thought, now. I didn't plan it the way it sounds when I tell it. I didn't have note cards. I wasn't performing. I just stood up, and the room looked at me, and I started talking. I said I also wanted to say something. I said that I was glad Brianna and Tyler were starting a family. I meant that. I looked at my sister when I said it, and I meant it. Then I said I needed to say something else that I had been carrying for a while. The room got quiet in the particular way rooms do when they sense something real is about to happen. I said that 8 months ago, I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I said I was pregnant. I said I was in emergency surgery for 3 hours because of internal bleeding that could have killed me if Marcus hadn't found me when he did. I heard my mother make a sound. I said that Marcus called my parents before my surgery. I said he called again during. I said my father called back after I was already in recovery to say he'd keep posted. I said that my parents did not come to the hospital that day because my sister was upset about a bridesmaid dress that had a stain on it. I said I had not told anyone this story because I kept believing something would change, that my parents would bring it up. apologize, acknowledge it. I said I had kept sending money every month because I thought that if I just kept being useful enough, available enough, forgiving enough, something would eventually shift. I looked at my mother. She was very still. I said I was not angry. I said I had thought I was, for a long time, but sitting here watching my mother give a speech about the joy of watching her daughter become a mother, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I said that I was going to stop the monthly transfers, not out of punishment and not out of cruelty, just because I finally understood what those transfers had always been, which was not help but a kind of asking. A persistent, expensive asking. See me. Choose me. Just once, choose me. And I had been asking for 4 years, and the answer had been given to me very clearly 8 months ago in a hospital waiting room, and it was time to accept it. Then I sat down. The room was so quiet I could hear someone's bracelet clink against a glass. Brianna looked at me, and then at my mother, and then back at her hands. Tyler had appeared in the doorway from the backyard, still holding his phone, looking like he'd walked into a room where the furniture had been rearranged. My mother stood up. Her voice was tight. She said, "This is not the time or place." My father, from across the room, said my name. Just my name, the way he always did when he wanted me to stop. I said, "I know. I'm sorry for the timing, but I kept waiting for a better one and I don't think it was coming." I picked up my purse. I hugged Brianna, who was very still in my arms. I said I hoped she had a safe and easy delivery. I meant that too. I walked to the door. My mother said, "Claire." And then again, sharper, "Claire." I turned around. She was standing in the middle of the living room full of women who were all looking somewhere else, the particular studied neutrality of people who are witnessing something private in a public space. My mother looked, for the first time in my memory, like she didn't know what to say. "I didn't know you were pregnant," she said. Her voice was different now, smaller. "I know," I said. "I was waiting for the right moment to tell you." I left. I sat in my car in my parents' driveway for about 4 minutes, not crying, just sitting. Then I drove home. Marcus was in the backyard, throwing a ball for Biscuit when I pulled in. He looked up when he heard the car. He read something in my face, I think, because he walked toward me without saying anything, and I walked toward him, and we stood in the driveway, and he put his arms around me. "How'd it go?" he said. "I said the thing," I said. He pulled back to look at me. "Which thing?" "All of it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay. Are you mad?" "Why would I be mad?" I didn't have a good answer for that. We went inside, and I sat at the kitchen table while Marcus made coffee, and Biscuit rested his enormous head on my knee, and I watched the afternoon light move across the floor, and felt something in my chest that had been tight for years begin, very slowly, to ease. My mother texted that evening. The message said, "We need to talk about what you did today." I read it, and put my phone face down on the nightstand. My father texted the next morning. His message said, "Your mother is very hurt." I read that one too. I didn't respond to either of them that day. I sat with the discomfort of that, which was real, and I let it be uncomfortable. Carol called from Richmond. Someone had told her what happened. She called Marcus first and then she called me, and when I answered she said, "Oh, sweetheart," in the voice she used when Marcus did something brave as a kid, and I pressed my hand over my eyes and breathed. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Weird," I said. "Kind of hollow. Kind of okay." "That sounds about right," she said. A few days later, Brianna called. I almost didn't answer. I sat and looked at her name on the screen for a long time, and then I answered, because whatever else was true, she was still my sister and she was pregnant, and I was not willing to lose everything in one afternoon. She was quiet for a moment when I picked up. Then she said, "I didn't know about the miscarriage, or the surgery. I didn't know any of that." "I know," I said. "Mom never told me." "I know." Another silence. Then she said, "I'm sorry they didn't come." That was wrong. It was the most direct thing Brianna had ever said to me in my adult memory. I recognized that it cost her something to say it, and I felt the cost of it, and I was grateful. "Thank you," I said. "Are you—" She stopped, started again. Are you guys going to try again? To have a baby? Maybe, I said. When we're ready. Okay, she said. And then, very quietly, like she was thinking out loud, Tyler's going to be in the delivery room. He's already said so. He means it, I think. I smiled a little. I hope he does. If he doesn't, I'm going to need someone there, she said. There was something in that sentence. Some small, careful door left open, and I heard it. I'll be there, I said. If you want me. She said she wanted me. I talked to my parents eventually. Not for a few weeks, and not before they stopped expecting me to call first and called me instead. My mother's first attempt was more defense than apology, and I let the conversation end early. Her second call, 2 weeks later, was different. She was quieter. She asked me about the surgery, the real questions, the ones she hadn't asked before. I told her. It was hard to tell her. She cried at certain parts and I sat with that. My father's call was short. He said he had not handled it right. He said he knew that. He did not explain why he hadn't handled it right, and I didn't push him, because some things are too old and too deep to excavate in a phone call, and what I needed from him was not an explanation but an acknowledgement, and I had received it. I did not restart the monthly transfers. Not out of punishment. I meant what I said at the shower. I stopped because I finally understood what I had been doing, and I wasn't willing to keep doing it. What I offered my parents from that point forward was my actual presence, my actual time. I called when I felt like calling. I visited when I wanted to visit. I showed up to things that mattered to me, and I stopped showing up to things I had only been attending out of obligation and hope. It is harder in some ways and easier in others. Marcus and I started trying again in the fall. Carol drove down the weekend, we decided, and we didn't tell her why. We just had dinner and watched a movie and sat on the porch in the evening. And she went home on Sunday, and I stood at the door and watched her drive away, and felt like something was in the right place. I'm not going to tell you that my relationship with my parents became easy, or that Brianna and I are suddenly close in the way I always wanted. That would not be true, and I am done telling myself comfortable, untrue things. What I will tell you is this. In April, Brianna went into labor 12 days early, at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. Tyler was there. He stayed the whole time, which I think surprised even Brianna. My parents arrived an hour in and sat in the waiting room. Marcus drove me to the hospital. We sat in those same plastic waiting room chairs, the kind with the metal armrests that are too high, and we drank bad coffee and we waited. My mother sat across from me for a while in silence, and then she moved to the chair beside me, and we sat together without talking. And outside the window, the April morning was bright and ordinary, and the parking lot was filling up with people going about their lives, and none of them knew they were ordinary. Which is the thing about ordinary days. My niece was born at 11:47 a.m. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Brianna named her Lily. When they let us into the room, Tyler was holding her, looking like a man who had just realized something enormous and was not entirely sure he was equal to it. Brianna was exhausted and radiant in the specific way of someone who has just done something they did not know they were capable of. My mother started crying. My father put his hand over his mouth. The nurse held Lily out to me and I took her. Carefully. The way you take something you've been waiting a long time to hold. And she was warm and very small and she smelled the way new babies smell, which is like nothing else on earth. I looked at her for a long time. "Hi," I said. "I'm your aunt." She didn't respond. She was 11 hours old and very occupied with existing. Marcus put his arm around me. I leaned into him. On the way home, we stopped for sandwiches and ate them in the car in the parking lot because we were too hungry to drive home first. Biscuit was losing his mind when we walked in, the way he always did, like we'd been gone for years instead of hours. Marcus got down on the floor with him, which he always did, and let Biscuit climb all over him and lick his face. I stood in the doorway and watched and thought about all of it. The year behind me, the surgery in the waiting room and the plastic flowers with the balloon, the shower and the silence after I stood up, Brianna saying I'll need someone there, and meaning it, Carol's chicken soup, the spreadsheet Marcus kept, quietly, for years, without ever using it against me. I thought about how long it had taken me to understand that being loved does not require you to make yourself indispensable. That the people who would have chosen you regardless. That the ones who only came when you were useful were telling you something important, and the kindest thing you could do for yourself was believe them. I thought, I believe them now. Biscuit extracted himself from Marcus and came to greet me, tail going. And I crouched down and let him lick my chin and I laughed. And Marcus looked up from the floor and smiled at me. And the late afternoon sun was coming through the front window, and the house smelled like coffee and dog and all the ordinary good things of our life. You okay? Marcus said. Yeah, I said. I really am.